r/askreddit. Lawyers of Reddit, what was the best gotcha moment you ever experienced? I acted for a plumber who ripped up a tile floor to replace a pipe. He installed new tile on top but warned the owners not to walk on it for 48 hours. He emphasized not to let their kids or their dogs walk on it either. They walked on it but alleged the defects were caused by improper install. We had an expert do a report which confirmed that it was consistent with proper installation but people walking on it too soon. Crazy homeowners still went to trial on it. In their evidence disclosure they included a series of pictures. One of the pictures had in the foreground a tile that was tilted upwards. The background very clearly showed a dog's paw pressing down on the other end of the tile. That wasn't so much an I got them situation as they got themselves. Old boss of mine went through something similar. Machined a part for this guy. Coating vendor took forever and a day to apply the coating required. Overnighted it back. Was on the verge of being late when it was delivered. Boss tells the guy to give the part for 5 days for said coating to cure before install. Because while it was solid enough to not put fingerprints in, it was still soft. This was an email with the coating vendor CC'd. This was on a Monday. Wednesday rolls around. Dude calls up having a conniption about the coating failing and he's gonna get his money back in court yada yada. Boss says fuck you, sue me. They go to court. Guy's first mistake was suing for the cost of the entire part plus coating, which was like $2,500. This makes no sense because the part itself was fine and made completely to the print. Coating was junk. This dumb motherfucker presents pictures with dates of the part. Coating failed. Mounted to the mating part the same day my boss had emailed him and said wait a few days. Boss had printout of said email, which was sent 5 hours before UPS gave notification of the part being delivered. Judge tossed it. Boss brought back ice cream. Was a good day. Someone told me this. The lawyer was describing the theft. The footprints make it seem as though he didn't go to the basement. And the defendant said, actually we did. I think it was a Judge Judy clip where the woman is listing a number of items stolen from her by an ex-boyfriend. Jewelry, credit cards, electronics, and a certain amount of money. There wasn't $X cash in there immediately followed by that side judges do when people are that dumb. Done. Told this story a few years back, but everything old is new again. My brother is a divorce attorney. His most memorable case, he was representing a guy in a divorce custody battle who was accused of horrific child abuse. Very graphic, very detailed depositions from the young kids against daddy. Things look grim. Then my brother notices the deposition transcript, done by social workers under oath, contains a question at the end from one of the kids. Did I hit my marks? My brother had previously tried to make it as an actor in Hollywood right out of high school, failing miserably, and decided to go into law, an altogether different form of acting. He wonders how little kids know about acting jargon. Subpoenas the wife's personal checking account during discovery. Sure enough, acting lessons. Deposes an extremely sketchy acting coach, and panics. Coach quickly coughs up DVDs of practice interrogations with the kids, hours of coaching the kids on exactly what imaginary things to say about daddy. He says it was his one and only Perry Mason moment in 20 plus years of practice, and dad got sole custody of the kids. Oh, this one's my favorite. When I was a prosecutor I had a guy who was representing himself. He was charged with car theft and evading. He was actually able to escape the cops for quite a distance and was captured later. His defense was that he wasn't the person. I got his calls from jail and he talked so much to his girlfriend about how he had committed the crimes. The look on his face when I told him that I was providing him copies of his jail calls was great. Edit. I remember an even better one. I had another guy who was representing himself. It was a residential burglary and one of the elderly neighbors saw the defendant running from the house. At trial, the defendant was cross-examining the witness and he asked, "Now when you saw this person running away," and the witness said, "You. I saw you running away." "You. Oh yes, your tears. They taste so salty and good. Your job must have sucked so bad. Glad you can savor the good times." I was deposing a guy in a large breach of contract fraud action. I asked him if he'd ever been convicted of a crime. He said no. Later in the dep I asked him the question again and there was no objection and he answered no. I then whipped out his indictment for felony fraud and his conviction for misdemeanor conspiracy and he denied it was him until I started asking about his co-conspirator, his son. And then he gave me the oh yeah I remember something about that. All cream and full C at that. I was involved in a patent dispute years ago that was basically large company going after small company. Not only did the judge decide we didn't infringe on the patents, but he then went on to invalidate the patents due to prior art we were able to show. The good old days before first to file came to pass. This question reminds me of one of my favorite scenes from Parks and Rec. Please, read Exhibit C, the transcript of your Twitter page leading to the immediately following crash. 9:15. 4 green lights in a row. Blessed. 9:17. Drive faster, blue Civic. Damn. Soxermums. 9:18. Go to pass this lady on the edge Kirch. Double quote. That's when I hit the fire hydrant. Sorry, allegedly hit the fire hydrant. 9:20. Just hit a fire hydrant, but I survived. Unbreakable. What's Marglis up to these days? Why not equal? Prosecution rests, Your Honor. We got that sequel though. Not as exciting in the moment as some other ones here, but we hired a private investigator to track our defendant in a fraud asset recovery case. Private investigator returned with a photograph of torn pieces of paper that clearly constituted a ripped up note, albeit in a foreign language. I happened to know said foreign language, so pieced it together and realized it was a letter written by the defendant raging at his accomplice for making highly specific mistakes that fucked him over in the context of our fraud asset recovery case. Obviously, we later had this verified and sworn to via affidavit by an official translator. It was unbelievable, the handwriting was a match, plus, he'd also signed it, and the contents were so specific, contained information about specific amounts going into specific trusts under specific names, that it was basically a smoking gun. We almost thought they'd planted it to throw us off, but the guy was just stupid and arrogant. Ran into a bit of a fight admissibility, but the letter ultimately helped us receive a significant settlement that made our clients extremely happy. This is a bizarre one. Not me, but my dad is a lawyer who had a case maybe 20 years back where he was defending a company who was being sued by a former employee. She claimed that she lost her sense of taste that had resulted from a workplace accident. What happened that caused this lawsuit? Can't remember. Her team had hired an independent expert from UCLA to substantiate her claims and basically say it was possible that she could have lost her sense of taste in the accident. My dad had a set of questions ready for him for cross-examination. But right before they go into court, he notices opposing counsel's team conferring, and the lady who is suing the company was drinking a mocha frappuccino. You can't bring drinks into court, so she tosses the frap into a trash can and goes into the courtroom. In his courtroom suit, my dad searched through the trash can until he retrieved the mocha frappuccino. On cross, he delivered his normal questions to the UCLA expert. Then he went back to his table, retrieved the frappuccino and asked the UCLA expert, abridged, "Did you see the plaintiff drinking this outside the courtroom?" Yes, that was her drink. A frappuccino costs what, about $4 and change at a Starbucks? Sure. Where a normal coffee costs about $2. Yes. Do people go to Starbucks to get caffeinated for their day? A frappuccino has caffeine in it. Yes, that's the main purpose. So if plaintiff was just trying to get caffeinated from Starbucks, why wouldn't she just get a coffee, instead of spending $2 extra on something that she can't even taste? The UCLA expert thought for a while and basically said, I suppose she wouldn't have got a frappuccino then, which my dad says is the only time he's ever seen an expert witness completely turn on their own side. Needless to say, the case was a wrap at that point. 2 years later, that UCLA expert was facing some legal trouble. He hired my dad. When I was a prosecutor a long time ago, I was to charge some kid who had been accused of killing his father. It looked like a pretty open and shut case. There was lots of evidence against him. He was due for a death sentence, but then the jury came back with not guilty. I pulled one of them aside afterwards to see what the hell happened. Turned out one juror had changed the whole thing around, twisting all the evidence to point out every flaw in the case. The switchblade used as the murder weapon was a very common one. The witness was so old and feeble-sighted she probably couldn't see much, and the shorter defendant probably couldn't have pulled off the downward stab that killed the man. All just enough evidence to decide that there was reasonable doubt. Fucking juror 8 took apart my whole case. 12 angry men. Good one there. Stand up to cross-examine, but it was 1 minute to lunch and the judge suggested we break off. I asked if I could just ask 2 questions. The guy had been grooming his neighbor's daughter and getting her to delete their FB chats. I asked for his FB username and password. He asked the judge if he had to answer. The jury actually laughed. I don't understand why that was funny. Not a lawyer, but one time I represented myself in a speeding ticket dispute. The officer supposedly caught me speeding with his radar. After he finished presenting his case, I got to cross-examine him. Now he was pretty good about providing evidence for the radar unit's accuracy, saying that he'd tested the radar before and after his shift with the tuning forks the radar came with. He even had the factory certificates for the tuning forks. But what he didn't realize was that the certificates were dated 1995. And I knew that those forks hadn't been RAE certified calibrated since they'd left the factory in 1995, because calibrating tuning forks just wasn't standard procedure for my local PD. So I laid all of that out and asked how he could be sure that the radar was accurate, since we couldn't be sure that the tuning forks he'd used were accurate. He just kind of went on a long ramble about how he'd been using the radar unit for a long time and how it had always worked well. At that point I was feeling pretty good and I thought I'd had him. But the judge found me guilty anyway, saying that the officer's visual speed estimation was enough to convict even if the radar evidence is in question. On the last court day, I proved that the killer was the prosecutor all along. This was while playing Phoenix Wright 3 though. My only full trial. Contractor ripping off my client who was no saint. I went through entire contract where each sub was listed and he agreed to each line as being part of contract. He agreed that amount was to be paid to the subs. He agreed to the total. What he failed to do was list any profit. My last question was, where is your profit in this contract? No answer from him. As written, he was working for free. Case dismissed by judge without me having to present my side.